In the winter of 1979, the town of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, was rocked by a chilling mystery that would remain unsolved for 4 decades. The tranquility of this Midwestern town was shattered when Michelle Martinko, a vivacious high school senior with dreams as big as her heart, was found brutally murdered in her family's car, a gruesome tableau of violence that sent shockwaves through the close-knit community. Michelle's vibrant life was abruptly extinguished, leaving her classmates, friends and family grappling with the horrific reality of her untimely end. The shock and horror that swept through the town was palpable. Cedar Rapids was no longer just a peaceful town. It was a place marked by a monstrous act of violence. Despite the tireless work of local law enforcement, the case of Michelle Martinko presented more questions than answers. Suspects were questioned and leads were followed, but the trail to her killer seemed to vanish as quickly as it appeared. Despite numerous suspects and leads, the case quickly went cold, leaving a grieving family and a frightened community in its wake. Michelle Martinko, born on the first day of spring in 1961, was known for her vibrant personality and love for life. A ray of sunshine, she was a beacon of joy and positivity in her small Iowa town. From a very young age, Michelle was drawn towards music. She had a voice that could light up a room and a passion that was infectious. Her talent was evident, and she was often seen as the star of her school choir. She was a familiar face in school, beloved by her peers. Michelle was popular not just because of her melodious voice, but because of her kind spirit and friendly demeanor. She was approachable, always wearing a bright smile on her face, and she had a knack for making everyone feel special. Michelle was more than just a singer or a popular schoolgirl. She had dreams. Dreams of a future filled with music, of a career on stage, basking in the applause of an appreciative audience. She saw a world beyond her small town and aimed to reach for the stars. In her heart, Michelle was a dreamer, a singer, a beacon of light. She was brimming with potential, with plans for a future that promised to be as bright as she was. Little did she know her life would be cut short in the most tragic way. On the night of December 19, 1979, Michelle attended a school choir banquet, never to return home. It was a typical winter evening in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The air was crisp, the stars were shining, and the city was alive with holiday cheer. Michelle, a vivacious 18-year-old, was excited to attend her school choir banquet. She was dressed in her best, her eyes sparkling with youthful enthusiasm. The banquet was held in a local hotel, and it was a night of music, laughter and camaraderie. Michelle was in high spirits, her voice blending harmoniously with her peers as they sang their hearts out. As the evening wound down, Michelle decided to make a quick stop at the Westdale Mall, a popular shopping centre just a short drive from the banquet hall. The mall was bustling with last-minute shoppers, its brightly lit stores filled with holiday merchandise. Michelle walked through the mall, perhaps looking for a Christmas gift or just enjoying the festive atmosphere. But as the clock ticked towards midnight, the mall began to empty. The stores closed their doors, and the shoppers and employees trickled out, leaving Michelle alone in the vast parking lot. It was in this deserted lot that the unthinkable happened. In the cold, dark expanse of the parking lot, Michelle was attacked. The assailant was brutal, leaving her with fatal stab wounds. In the midst of the holiday cheer, a life was cruelly snuffed out. The mall, once a symbol of joviality and merriment, had turned into a grisly crime scene. The next morning, as the sun rose over Cedar Rapids, a chilling discovery was made. Michelle's lifeless body was found in her family's car, her blood staining the snow-covered pavement. The news sent shockwaves through the community, turning the festive season into a time of mourning. Her body was discovered in the early hours of the next morning, marking the beginning of a decades-long mystery. The murder of Michelle Martinko was not just a tragic loss of a young life, but the start of a haunting enigma that would perplex investigators for many years to come. As the news of Michelle's murder spread, law enforcement swung into action, but the case was far from straightforward. In the initial stages of the investigation, a number of obstacles presented themselves. There were no witnesses who had seen anything suspicious on the night of the murder. It was as if the crime had occurred in a vacuum, with no one around to see or hear anything that could lead detectives to the perpetrator. The lack of a clear motive was another stumbling block. Michelle was a well-loved young woman without any known enemies. She led a quiet life, and there was nothing to suggest that she was involved in anything that could have led to her murder. The absence of a motive left law enforcement grappling in the dark. It was like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. Physical evidence was also disconcertingly scarce. The crime scene yielded little in the way of forensic clues. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no hair or fibre samples that could point to a suspect. The killer had been meticulous, almost surgically precise, leaving behind nothing that could trace back to them. The police worked tirelessly, interviewing countless individuals, trawling through hours of CCTV footage and exploring every possible avenue of investigation. But despite their best efforts, they kept hitting dead ends. The case was like a labyrinth with no clear path to the centre. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the investigation began to stall. The leads dried up, the tips stopped coming in, and the trail began to go cold. The case of Michelle Martinko, once a top priority, started to slip into the annals of unsolved murders. Despite their best efforts, the police were unable to make any significant progress in the case. The investigation, which had begun with such urgency and determination, was slowly but surely grinding to a halt. The killer, it seemed, had vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a chilling mystery and a grieving community. Years turned into decades, and the Michelle Martinko case slowly faded from public memory, becoming yet another unsolved murder. A chilling reality indeed. The once bustling investigation began to crawl, the leads dwindled, and the hope of solving the case slowly started to ebb away. Investigators were left scratching their heads. The evidence was scarce, and the leads even scarcer. The culprit had left no trace, no fingerprint, no discernible face to remember. The case was as cold as the winter night on which Michelle was cruelly taken away. The intricate web of clues, once thought to hold the key to the mystery, now seemed like an unfathomable labyrinth leading nowhere. The lack of progress was a heavy burden for the investigators. Each day brought the same routine, the same dead ends. The case files started to gather dust, the photographs began to fade, and the urgency that once propelled the investigation was replaced with a resigned acceptance. The Michelle Martinko case was on the verge of being consigned to the annals of unsolved crimes. But the impact of this cold case echoed far beyond the walls of the police station. It was felt most deeply by Michelle's family and friends. Their lives were forever marked by the void left by Michelle's departure. The light of their lives had been extinguished, leaving them in a perpetual twilight of sorrow and unanswered questions. Her parents had to grapple with the unimaginable pain of outliving their child, their hopes for justice fading with each passing year. Her friends were left with the haunting memory of a vivacious young woman, now a ghost of their past. Everyone who knew Michelle was scarred by the tragedy, their lives taking a tragic detour on that fateful December night. Yet, despite the despair, there was a glimmer of hope. The case might have gone cold, but it was far from forgotten. The investigators were determined, the family persistent, and the friends unwavering in their quest for justice. But as it turns out, the story was far from over. Nearly 40 years after Michelle's murder, a new technology breathed life into the cold case. The relentless march of progress, it seems, had not forgotten about Michelle Martinko. This was a breakthrough made possible by the advent of DNA profiling, a scientific technique that was still in its infancy at the time of the murder. DNA profiling, or genetic fingerprinting, as it's often called, had revolutionized criminal investigation. Suddenly, investigators were able to draw a wealth of information from even the tiniest biological samples left at a crime scene. A strand of hair, a drop of blood, or in this case a sample from Michelle's dress, could now potentially lead to a suspect. However, it wasn't just the ability to match DNA samples that made this technology so crucial in Michelle's case. What made it groundbreaking was its use in generating a composite sketch of the suspect. This was achieved through a process called phenotyping, which analyses DNA to predict physical characteristics such as eye color, hair color, and even the shape of the face. Scientists, using the DNA sample recovered from Michelle's dress, were able to create an image of what the killer might look like. For the first time since the murder, investigators had a face to go with the DNA. It was a face that had eluded them for nearly 4 decades. A face that, until now, had only existed as a string of genetic code. This was a significant moment in the investigation. Suddenly, the case that had gone cold was hot again. The investigators now had a powerful tool at their disposal, a picture of the suspect, generated from the very DNA he had left behind. However, it's important to remember that a sketch is not a photograph. It's an approximation, a best guess based on available data. And while it provided investigators with a clearer image of the killer, it was still just one piece of the puzzle. This new lead brought renewed hope, but would it be enough to finally solve the case? A question that would soon find its answer as the investigation moved into its next phase. In 2018, police arrested a man named Jerry Burns, marking a significant turn in the Michelle Martinko case. This breakthrough came nearly 40 years after the tragic murder shook the small town of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. But how was this man linked to the case after all these years? The answer lay in the burgeoning field of forensic genealogy. Jerry Burns, a business owner from Manchester, Iowa, was taken into custody on December 19th, the same date as Michelle Martinko's murder in 1979. The long arm of the law had finally caught up with him. The evidence? A blood sample found at the crime scene all those years ago. With the advent of advanced DNA technology, authorities were able to trace this sample back to Burns. But the arrest was just the beginning. The trial that ensued was both gripping and complex, as the prosecution presented a case built entirely on DNA evidence. The defense argued that while the DNA was indeed Burns, it did not conclusively prove he was the murderer. They claimed the sample could have been innocently transferred or contaminated. However, the prosecution presented a compelling counter-argument. They pointed to the location of the blood sample on Martinko's dress, suggesting it was likely the result of a struggle. They also highlighted the violent nature of the crime, arguing that such violence indicated it was not a random act, but a personal one. The trial was not without its twists and turns. As Burns sat impassively in the dock, the courtroom was filled with tense anticipation. The jury listened as the prosecution and defense presented their cases, weighing the evidence before them. After 2 weeks of testimonies and deliberations, the jury reached their verdict. Jerry Burns was found guilty of first-degree murder. The room was silent as the verdict was read, the gravity of the moment sinking in. After nearly 4 decades, Michelle Martinko's family and friends could finally find some semblance of closure. The sentencing was equally as momentous. Burns was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the judge read out the sentence, there was a palpable sense of relief in the courtroom. The long journey for justice had reached its conclusion. Burns' conviction was a testament to the relentless pursuit of justice and the power of modern forensic science. It demonstrated that even after decades, the truth can still come to light no matter how deeply it's buried. After 4 decades, justice was finally served. The resolution of the Michelle Martinko case brought closure to a community that had been haunted by her murder for decades. The discovery of the truth, albeit late, was a salve to the wounds of the past. The ripples of this resolution were felt far and wide, from Michelle's family to the farthest reaches of the scientific community. Michelle's family, who had been waiting for answers for nearly 4 decades, finally had their questions answered. They had lived under the shadow of uncertainty for too long, their grief perpetually fresh with the lingering mystery. The resolution brought a sense of peace, a chance to finally grieve without the haunting question of who. But it was a bittersweet victory, for it brought back memories of a life cut short, of the vibrant and promising teenager who was Michelle Martinko. The community around them, too, breathed a collective sigh of relief. The spectre of Michelle's unsolved murder had hung over them like a dark cloud, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the cruelty of fate. Now, they could finally put the past to rest and remember Michelle as she was, a bright light extinguished too soon. Beyond the personal sphere, the resolution of the Michelle Martinko case had significant implications for the field of forensic science. The breakthrough in this case, achieved through advanced DNA analysis, was a testament to the power and potential of science in the pursuit of justice. It demonstrated the importance of tenacity in scientific investigation, of pushing boundaries and exploring new techniques. It highlighted the impact that forensic science can have, not just in solving cases, but in healing communities and bringing closure to families. Michelle Martinko's case serves as a stark reminder of the power of persistence and the relentless pursuit of justice. It underlines the importance of never giving up, of seeking truth no matter how much time has passed. It is a testament to the strength of a community, the resilience of a family, and the power of science in the face of adversity.